My mom texted me, "Don't come to the wedding. You and your kids just make things awkward." No warning, no phone call, just that sentence, cold and final, lighting up my screen while I was sorting through a pile of overdue bills at my kitchen table. My brother, Mark, replied with a thumbs up. I stared at it, my throat tight, then typed back, "Then I guess you won't be needing my gift." They kept the thumbs ups coming in the group chat, completely unaware that I was holding the final piece of a puzzle they didn't even know was missing. And that's when the foundation they'd taken for their entire lives finally crumbled. Before I tell you how it all fell apart, hit like and tell me in the comments, have you ever been the family scapegoat the moment you stopped playing your part? When people hear stories like mine, they always ask how it gets that bad. The truth is, it's a slow erosion, grain by grain. My mother, Carol, had a way of making obligation feel like love, and I was her most dedicated student. Ever since I could remember, it was my job to be the responsible one. When my brothers, Mark and David, wanted to start a band, I covered the cost of their instruments because Mom said, "You have a real career." When the roof needed repairs after a storm, I paid the deductible because Dad said, "You're the only one with savings." They never did. I guess I learned that in our family, affection was a transaction. Still, I kept paying, thinking it was the price of belonging. I'm 38 now, a widow with a 7-year-old daughter, working as a paralegal at a small firm. My life is a cycle of deadlines, packed lunches, and a deep, quiet tiredness that settles in your bones. And even with that, I made room for them. For almost a year, I'd been helping my parents navigate the sale of my grandmother's house, the only real asset left in the family. Every document, every meeting with the realtor, every signature, I handled it. It was a beautiful old Victorian in a neighborhood that had suddenly become desirable, worth more than any of us had dreamed. I told myself it was my duty, that I was helping secure their future. I just didn't know I was building my own cage. Looking back, the clues were there, little flickers I chose to ignore. The way my dad's voice got tight when I mentioned getting an appraisal. The way Mark would change the subject whenever I brought up the division of proceeds. "You're so much better at this stuff," he'd say, clapping me on the shoulder. "You handle it." And I did. I paid the lawyer's retainer, the staging fees, the landscaper to spruce up the curb appeal, all from my own account. I told myself it was an advance, that they'd settle up when the check cleared. They never did. Still, I showed up. I met with the stager, coordinated with the photographer, and handled the frantic calls from the realtor while my parents claimed it was all too stressful. Mom would say, "That's what family is for," and I clung to that right up until that text. Maybe that's why it felt like a door slamming shut. It wasn't about a wedding. It was about realizing I was the family secretary, not a member. Sitting at that table surrounded by my own mounting bills, I wasn't thinking about getting even. I was thinking about all the times I had begged to be heard as a person, not a function. And in a single, brutal moment, that text made it all clear. I wasn't invited to their family. I was their administrator, and my tenure was over. The next day, the group chat was still active. My phone buzzed incessantly. More thumbs-ups, jokes about drama queens, a gif of someone being shown the door. It wasn't just mean, it was a performance, and they all had a part. I watched the notifications stack up before I finally archived the chat. The silence that followed was more powerful than any argument. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand, and I tallied up the last year. Every fee, every hour off work, every errand run. I had poured over $5,000 of my own money and countless hours into making that house sale seamless for them. I had sacrificed time with my daughter, used my vacation days, and now they were saying my presence was an inconvenience. The hurt didn't well up. It solidified into something clear and unyielding. They didn't want me. They wanted my labor. That evening, my dad called. His voice was low, weary. "I saw the messages, Chloe," he said. "That wasn't right." I could hear the conflict in his pause, the weight of a man who'd spent his life keeping the peace. I told him it was fine, that I was okay. He knew I wasn't, but he didn't push. After we hung up, I opened my filing cabinet. I pulled out the folder for the house sale, the one I had organized and maintained. My name was on every other line as the point of contact. I hadn't realized how much that folder represented, not just a house, but the weight of their expectations. I looked around my small, quiet living room, my daughter's drawings taped to the fridge, and knew this was the only territory that was truly mine. Everything else was a loan I had foolishly believed was a gift. My cursor found the email from the title company, asking for a final confirmation before the closing date next week. I remembered the agent's reassuring words. "You're the main point of contact. Just let us know if anything changes." My fingers moved calmly across the keyboard. I wrote, "Regarding the closing, is the primary contact able to halt the process if necessary?" and pressed send. The reply came the next morning. "Yes, as the designated representative, you have that authority." I read it twice, my breath steady. They thought I would absorb the insult, pay the final fees, and quietly hand over the keys to their new financial freedom. They never considered that the keyholder had just changed the locks. I didn't stop the sale immediately. I waited 3 days, long enough for the memes in the family chat to turn into planning for the proceeds. By Friday, Mark had posted a screenshot of a new sports car on his feed with the caption, "Almost time." I watched it for a moment, then opened my laptop. The title agent, Susan, answered on the first ring. "Hi, Chloe, all set for closing on Monday." "Actually," I said, my voice even, "I need to formally withdraw my representation and pause the sale indefinitely." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "I see. As the legal coordinator on file, you can do that. I'll need to notify all parties immediately." Just like that, a year of work, their payday, everything was frozen. And instead of panic, I felt a profound, spreading calm. After hanging up, I called my best friend, Sarah, a single mom who'd been struggling to find a stable home for her and her son. I told her about the Victorian, about the stalled sale. When I offered to put her in touch with the realtor to rent it with an option to buy, at a rate she could afford. She was silent for a full 10 seconds before she started to cry. She didn't know she was giving me a gift, too, a chance to repurpose that house into a blessing instead of a weapon. By that evening, the silence from their end was deafening. I knew why. The notification from the title company would have gone out. I pictured the chaos, my mom's frantic calls, my brother's confusion. I poured a cup of tea, leaned against the counter, and waited, not with malice, but with a detached interest. How long until they realized the engine of their machine had quietly stepped out? The fallout was swift. By Saturday, my phone was a firework of missed calls and voicemails. "Chloe, the title company says you stopped the sale. What is going on? Call me back right now, this isn't funny." I didn't answer. I let them marinate in the uncertainty I'd been served for years. Dad called around noon. His voice was thick with strain. "They're losing their minds over here," he said. "Your mom is hysterical. Mark is screaming about his car. I told them this was coming." He paused. "I'm sorry, kid. You were always the glue." I didn't cry. I just said, "Thank you for seeing me." That night, my mother called my landline. When I picked up, she launched in, no hello. "How dare you sabotage your family's future, after all we've done for you?" I let her rage, her voice shrill and cracking. When she finally paused, I asked softly, "Was I ever actually part of this family or just its staff?" Silence, then the backtracking. "You're being too sensitive. It was a joke. Mark was just stressed about the wedding." "You all seem to find it very funny," I replied. "Fix this, Chloe," she demanded, her voice trembling. I hung up. No goodbyes, no final word, just a quiet click. The next day, I met Dad for coffee. He looked exhausted. "Your mother isn't speaking to me. Mark is trying to find another lawyer, but the retainer alone is thousands we don't have. The sale is in limbo." I stirred my latte. "And the wedding?" He gave a dry, hollow laugh. "Still on, in our backyard. Your mom says it'll be cozier." I almost smiled. "I'm sure it will be." He looked at me, really looked at me. "You know, I told her if she doesn't make this right with you, I'm not signing anything." I raised an eyebrow. "And what did she say?" He looked down at his hands. "She said you've poisoned me against them." I smiled, a real one this time. "Or maybe you're just finally immune to the poison." On the day of the wedding, it was overcast and humid. I wasn't there, but a well-meaning aunt sent me a video. The backyard was strung with cheap fairy lights. A folding table served as the altar. The caption read, "So intimate." The irony was palpable. Later that night, Dad called. "You won't believe it," he said, and I could hear the exhaustion warring with grim amusement in his voice. The caterer canceled last minute. Apparently, Mark had been arguing with him over the price for weeks. They served cold cuts from the grocery store. The best man's speech was just a long, awkward story about a fishing trip that went wrong. I covered the phone's receiver, not wanting him to hear the sigh of relief that wasn't quite a laugh. "Your mother spent the whole reception blaming me for the bad vibes," he continued. "She said I let you ruin everything. I told her the only thing that's ruined is the illusion that we could treat you this way forever." He took a long, shaky breath. I think, for a second, she heard me. When the call ended, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the quiet rhythm of my daughter sleeping in the next room. I thought I'd feel victorious, but all I felt was a deep, settling peace, as if a constant, low-grade alarm in my soul had finally been switched off. A few days later, Mark texted, "Happy now, you destroyed Mom and Dad's retirement." I read it, then placed the phone's screen down on the counter. I didn't need to respond. My silence was the only answer he would ever get. A week later, Dad showed up at my door with a small suitcase. "I'm leaving, Chloe," he said, his voice firmer than I'd ever heard it. "I can't live in a home where kindness is seen as a weakness to be exploited." He handed me a folded check. "It's the retainer you paid the lawyer. I took it from the joint account. They'll never pay you back, but you deserve this." I tried to hand it back. "Keep it, Dad. You've paid enough." He pressed it into my palm. "No, this is yours." That night I stood on my small porch. The air was cool and clean. I thought about that text, the thumbs-ups, the laughter. They thought I was being cruel when I finally enforced a boundary. But they never saw it wasn't an attack. It was a surrender of a war I never wanted to fight in the first place. Dad moved into a small apartment. There was no dramatic scene, just a quiet parting. He left a note on my kitchen table. "You taught me it's never too late to choose yourself." When we had coffee the following week, he looked years younger. "The house is so quiet now," he said. "Your mom is pretending it's a break, but Mark's car loan fell through, and the realtor says the buyers are looking at another property." He shook his head. "You know, they still haven't apologized, not a real one." I smiled, but it was a smile of understanding, not victory. "They can't. An apology would mean admitting the bank is closed." He laughed, a real, genuine sound. "The bank is closed," he repeated, as if tasting the words. Later, I sat on my porch swing, watching my daughter chase fireflies in the twilight. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom. "We're still your family, you know." I read it, then typed out my reply, my fingers sure and steady. "I know, but I'm no longer your employee." She didn't write back. Inside, my daughter was giggling, her small hands cupped around a flickering light. I realized then that peace isn't something you find in the absence of noise, but in the presence of your own worth. I used to think family meant enduring everything. Now I know it means building something worth enduring for. Walking away wasn't about burning a bridge. It was about finally realizing I was on the wrong side of the river, and it was time to build my own home on my own shore. So if you've ever had to choose between your sanity and your family's narrative, listen to me. Choose your sanity. You'll dream again. You'll breathe easier. And if this story resonates with you, tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.